Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Galaxy of Fiction, and this one's going to hit us on I think a personal level, but in a funny way. But I think we both have some good backgrounds on this, so I don't really want to waste too much time. So let's get right to ludicrous speed, because this is the Spaceballs, the retro review, and Spaceballs. Man, it's been I think it came out over 30 years ago now. I believe it was 85 or 86. You would think I would have this in our notes here, but I did not write that down. But
I think you're right, 86. I think that's about the year.
Yeah, so I mean, it's at least been 30 years since we've seen the Mel Brooks classic for the first time. And I just want to start out by talking about like why in some viewers they might be, what's Spaceballs? Well, we'll jump to the bottom of my notes here. It might be the greatest Star Wars spoof of all time. It makes fun of other movies, as most movie spoofs do, and it makes fun of a range of topics, but it's obviously based on Star Wars. So, and it really... Mel Brooks was always kind of making spoofy, very funny, comedic type movies. For me, I know you got Blazing Saddles and all that, but Spaceballs has got to be my favorite Mel Brooks movie of all time. And I remember I watched Spaceballs, guys, before I ever watched Star Wars.
Now that's interesting.
Yes.
I think that's very interesting. As big a Star Wars fan as you are, that you saw the spoof before you saw the real thing.
Oh yeah, and years and years and years before. I remember as a little kid watching with my sister and with my parents. Every time it would come on HBO, we were watching. Of course, I loved all the lines where they were cussing, and I didn't know they were cussing. And we'll get to another personal story later with that. When I said my very first cuss word, I was probably about 5 years old, because I was very upset over it when I did that. But we were talking about this. I brought this subject up. I said, hey, do you want to do a retro review of Spaceballs? Do you like Spaceballs? And you were like, yes, I love it. This is your copy of the movie here. And we got into talking and said, hey, let's just save this for the show, because I started telling you some of my personal stuff with it, which I've just mentioned now. And you were talking about how you used to watch it with your brother, I believe you said, and all this. So just get in, like, why do you love Spaceballs and that personal side of it?
Well, yeah, and my older brother was a bigger Star Wars fan at that time than I was, because he, older, so he was able to see the films as they were coming out. So, his probably first Star Wars, if I had to guess, was Empire Strikes Back, and seeing, them out of order, but still loving them, because they're, hard to not like the Star Wars films, especially when they were new, the original trilogy, of course. But he would have either this was on either TV or it was in the rental video store, VHS days, and I just remember laughing hilariously, not getting all of the jokes.
Oh yeah, but that's the sign of a great comedy, is when it's funny as a kid, you can rewatch it as an adult, and then you get all the jokes and you like it for a completely different reason. Ghostbusters is a prime example for me, where I just liked it as a kid because of the ghosts, and then I got all of Bill Murray's humor as an adult, and I fell back in love with it and loved it for a whole new reason. But back to Spaceballs.
Well, and I always remembered, that this is a comedy, but I remember the sets being so lavish, and it was like, this isn't like some of the other comedies out there on kind of a lower budget and all this, that this one had that polished Star Wars, well, like the Empire's always, got that polished look, that the floors are always so clean, and you can almost see yourself in all the panels and all that. And then they also had the rough and gruff Han Solo kind of ship that is kind of like, well, he also lives there, it's almost like his camper. And of course, what did they do?
It's a Winnebago with wings.
Yes. And so they matched that perfectly. What I remember from Star Wars, I almost looked at it like, wow, this must be actually, as a kid, even thinking that this somehow even in the same universe as Star Wars? Are they actually going to see the characters, and they're going to see Darth Vader meet Dark Helmet, at some point, because they really wanted it not just to be a silly comedy, but something that you could almost believe that this world exists.
Right. I mean, they tied in a lot of Earth things too, because the ship that Princess Vespa takes off in at the beginning of the film is a Mercedes.
Right.
Of course, we know this because when they need saving, Barf, played by John Candy, who's playing the Chewbacca-ish character, he's half man, half dog. He's a Mog.
Mog.
His name is Barf, and when they ask him his name, barf, not in here, buddy. This is a Mercedes, which is one of my top quotes that I've got down here in my notes. But Joan Rivers responding to him as she was playing the C-3PO character is, well, now I'm not even the...
she's Dot Matrix. Yes.
Dot Matrix. See, I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew it.
You knew it.
I knew it.
Yeah.
So, just think, and you think about like the last, and it's like, oh, like Joan Rivers, she was actually like a funny kind of actress, like, and it was like because knowing her from like after Spaceballs, like you just know her from like she's passed away now, but I do believe that's right. Yes, she's passed away. Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to kill people that aren't dead. Yeah. But I just always knew her from the E and the Runway stuff. And so to see her, it's just kind of a trip that she was, to me, in that movie. I'm not that familiar with the rest of her acting career, but the last 30 years of her life that I knew about was just her on the E criticizing everybody's outfits. So,
yeah, the red carpet kind of stuff and all of that. And, of course... great cast and all that, but the quotes you said, it's so quotable, and that's what I think most of Mel Brooks films have, is that, you'll say a quote like that, and someone will sit and think, oh, what's that from, and it's like it's from a Mel Brooks film or something, funny like that, or it's from the Airplane movies, if you remember those, very quotable. Right. This one definitely has those quotes in it that people bring up, and all the geeks in the room go crazy because they, I get it. Yeah.
Something that just popped in my mind, and I thought of this when it came out, but we were talking, I did an episode of the Monster Report here before we did this episode, and you mentioned Rogue One there, and it's funny that when they're trying to go to the planet at the end of the movie and break into the Empire's planet there, that they basically have created a shield around the planet that is impenetrable, which is actually the storyline for Spaceballs, because King Roland's planet, Princess Vespa's planet, that the Spaceballs are trying to steal all of their oxygen because their planet is running out. Right. So they're going to turn their Death Star is a maid, basically, and she's going to suck all of the oxygen out, but they need to break into this shield that is covering this planet. So in a funny way, it's kind of like, okay, now it's kind of flipped in reverse. It's not Mel Brooks making fun of Star Wars or doing a spoof of Star Wars. Now it's like, oh, now we're starting to see similarities. Like they did this in the spoof, and now they're turning it into like a legitimate plot line.
Exactly.
So it's kind of, and I don't know if that ever crossed anybody's mind. Hey, should we do this? It kind of just seems like we're just trying to vacuum the oxygen out of this planet. But it is kind of funny to think of it in that way.
No, you're right, actually. And there's something to kind of take from that, because in this, the evil empire and all that is not about conquest of the galaxy so much. They have a need. They need air, and so what do? You take it from this planet that's rich in oxygen and all that. So there is actually a storyline to go with this comedy. It's not just them dressing up like Star Wars characters and saying some funny lines for the camera. That they actually did have a good storyline to go with it that you could be engaged in and laugh at it all at the same time. And so, but they didn't just spoof Star Wars in this, of course. If you remember, you've got Planet of the Apes at the end of it.
There goes the planet. Yeah.
Alien, which actually has the actor John Hurt from the film Alien doing the chest-bursting scene, and he's doing the dance.
Please.
So they've got so many different, spoofs that they kind of throw in there, and it's not just Star Wars, and it does a lot of sci-fi at the same time of it, and of course it answers so many of the different questions, like what is it really like in the Darth Vader suit, and Rick Moranis answers it quite right away. I can't breathe in this thing. He's breathing so heavily. You always wondered why Darth Vader was breathing so heavily. You didn't know it was all a life support system. He's just wearing it because he's called Dark Helmet, I guess.
He wants to be intimidating. And of course, then he goes to the desert, and then he's got the safari kind of outfit on, where he's wearing just like it's that neutral color, but he's still got the big helmet, and he looks like he's a. So, you have Bill Pullman is in it, who now you look at, now he's the old man. Back in this 30 years ago, he's the kind of young whippersnapper in it. Of course, he's hilarious. The first time we meet him, he wakes up because we think he's drunk or hungover and going to get sick. No, actually, he's just calling his sidekick Barf there. But, you know, he plays into it, the physical comedy, you know, and all this. So, of course, he plays Lone Star, which is obviously a play on Han Solo, but it's also, he's got Luke Skywalker's character also tied up in him because he is the protagonist who's becoming going to be the guy who's going to fight, you know, Dark Helmet. And of course they make fun of the Empire line, you know, what is, you know, I was your father's roommate's ex, whatever. What does that make us? Absolutely nothing. So
yeah, and it even brings in that whole idea of a force, or in this case the Schwartz.
Yeah, the Schwartz.
Yeah, so it's got to have some.
I found it in a Cracker Jack box.
Yeah, it's not all this mythical background with a great storyline behind it. It's really just that. It's like but yeah, there's and even the whole chosen one idea that that he's actually some sort of he has a background where he's a prince, so he can marry the princess.
Yes.
So yeah,
she has to marry a prince. It can't be anybody. And she's gonna marry Prince Valium, who goes to sleep all the time.
And as a kid, of course that joke was. Yeah. Why is he falling asleep? I don't get it. He's falling asleep the whole time, and his name is Prince Valium. I don't get it. Finally, someone explained it to me, and I was, got older and all that. Oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. Okay, I get it. And so, but talk about the cast, actually. You mentioned Bill Pullman, of course, we know from Independence Day, other films too. And I don't think he really stuck with much comedy, actually. I don't think he, did much more. Someone out there can maybe comment on that. But I think
everybody remembers Bill Pullman from Independence Day, and there's a handful of other movies that I think he's well known for, but not really, not a person you think of as a comedian. But I love that when you get to see somebody when they're not usually in that, like they're doing something different. Whether maybe it's a comedian going and doing drama or vice versa. Yeah. Just to see somebody out of their element, and because I think that kind of can make it actually more human when you take away some of the naturalism that they do in acting nowadays, where everything's got to be perfect, but that's not really how life is or how we interact with each other, whether the camera's on or off. There's there's little mistakes and slips of the mind all over the place, every day in conversations. Movies, you don't really get to see that. It's got to be clean cut. The characters have to be. But I think when you have like an actor who at that point probably not the resume that he's got now, but now you look back and it's like, okay, he was doing this comedic role, and so it's kind of a different thing for him when you look at the rest of what he did in his career. But just looking at John Candy, comedy, but in Spaceballs, I'm not even sure if that maybe it cracks his top 5. If you ask John Candy fans, when you start talking about like Airplane and all these other movies that people love John Candy, I'm not even sure if Spaceballs even makes the list for a John Candy comedy movie list, but it's right up there for me. I'm not the biggest comedy fan. I like a good one every now and again, but so when one sticks out to me like Spaceballs, obviously it can last a lifetime, and it has. Yeah.
And the late great John Candy, of course. Think about what he could have done later on in life if he were still with us. But and the late great Joan Rivers, of course. They got a pretty good group there, actually. Rick Moranis, we remember from the Ghostbusters. Lewis. I remember
Honey,
even
I
as
Shrunk
a kid.
the Kids. He made a fortune of money making those movies. I think that's why it's part of the reason why he hasn't, because he doesn't have to work anymore. And I think he stopped to take care of his family a long time ago. So we haven't had Rick Moranis as an actor in quite a while. So, Dick Van Patten, he played King Roland. And it's just like that name. And then Dom DeLuise played Pizza the Hut. And that's just like, and people watching this, they'd be like, I've heard the name Dom DeLuise. You might not even, and I couldn't tell you other movies he's done, but it's like one of those iconic actors' names. It's like he was before my time, really. Yeah. But just to see that name, I'm looking at the cast of this movie, and it's just like, okay, Dom DeLuise, like, okay, famous guy, let's put him in a Pizza the Hut outfit, and like we're not going to see him, you're not going to know who it is. You're a delicious boss.
But it's his voice, he's got a signature voice, so he does do a lot of animation, like he's if you remember the American Tail, Fievel, he was like the cat in that. He's done a lot of Don Bluth animation voices, actually, because he's got a cool, unique, interesting kind of big guy lovable comedy kind of thing. In this case, he's the gangster. He's the Joao, obviously.
He ate himself to death.
But yeah, and of course Mel Brooks is in almost every. If probably somebody can correct me, I think he is in every single one of his films in some form or another, whether it's a cameo or he takes on kind of a starring role.
He plays President Scroob, I believe is how you pronounce it, Scroob in this movie. Of course, you see him. He opens up the can of air. No, I swear we don't. We don't. Perrier air.
Yeah.
But and he, no, we don't. And then they teleport him, which is a Star Trek thing.
Right,
they phase him into the next room, and you're backwards. Why didn't anybody tell me my butt was this big? We don't even need to do the top quote segment because I'm just rattling the whole movie off here.
I know.
But yeah, like I mean, it's incredible to go back and look at the people that made that movie and. At the time, everybody's just like, oh, what is it? Star Wars, with the people that were saying, oh, Star Wars ruined movies. Even back then, it had its critics the same way it does today. Maybe a different style of criticizing it for different reasons than they do today. Because now it's just Star Wars' own fan base trying to tear it apart. Back then, it was the people like, well, this isn't, these movies, like you go to movie. I talked to a guy one time. He went to movie school. Like this is what Mike Climo is his name, and a great guy with the Star Wars ring theory. But he said when he in the 90s when he went to film school, like he loved Star Wars, and then he got in class and found out that everyone hated Star Wars because that's not like as a film in that in the art in that yes in that vein. So I'm sure when Spaceballs came out, it's a spoof, it's a comedy, it's Mel Brooks, but now you go back and look at it and it's like, wow, this is really good, and really it stands up not just the content, and the comedy. But the special effects, as you were talking about earlier in the sets, for realizing when that movie was made and probably that it probably didn't have a huge budget, but they made it look like that it kind of did. So
they put a lot of TLC into it because if they're gonna make it sell like an actual Star Wars spoof, that we want to believe that this is an equivalent of the Empire and all of that, and their ships are big and lavish, and of course every time that they have the Darth Vader character walk in, that everyone's kind of intimidated by him, and you get that with all their equivalent of the stormtroopers. They're all kind of intimidated by him, and he's got a power that's beyond all of them, and that's why he's kind of in charge, if you will. But there's always someone above him. They didn't have an emperor kind of equivalent, but they had President Scroob. But back to Mel Brooks, don't forget he plays Yogurt as well.
Oh yes, Yogurt. Yeah. So he's like, hey, maybe that's how he kept the budget down. He just cast himself in multiple roles
and then paid himself whatever he could. He plays in a lot of his films. He'll like insert himself. I'm trying to actually remember if he's in Young Frankenstein. That's my personally favorite Mel Brooks film of all time. Not to downplay Spaceballs because it's right up there too. I watch it a lot, as well as Young Frankenstein. I'm trying to remember if he's actually a cameo.
And then people watching, I mean, the people that are familiar with Mel Brooks are going to say, hey, Blazing Saddles. So there's going to be all kinds of debate on this. Everybody's got different favorites. That's fine.
Yeah.
But my favorite part of, since we're talking about Mel Brooks, I didn't mention this on the first show, did I? I might have talked to you about this privately. Yeah. When he, what was it, Mongo? Is that who the big guy? He punches the horse, and the horse falls into the punch instead of flying backwards. The horse collapses actually into the momentum of the punch, so it's like and he falls into it, and the horse just it's so fake and but it's just so funny. But
what was that film then? It was History of the World, or was it another Mel Brooks film?
I thought that one was in Blazing Saddles.
Was it Blazing? You're right. Yeah, it is.
I just remember it was like a Western setting, so I think it was Blazing Saddles.
You're right. It was Blazing Saddles. I think I had History of the World in my mind because do you remember at the end of History of the World where they do it's a kind of a precursor to Spaceballs. If you remember, did you see History of the World?
It's been so many years ago.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in years either. But I remember at the end they kind of do a trailer for a new film called Jews in Space. and it's actually kind of a Star Wars spoof, but I think it kind of led the way to what he was going to do next, which was Spaceballs the movie. And so because they showed the space battles, and it was like the Star of David was their ship. And all that.
We're still waiting for Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Right. I've heard that was somewhere out there in the...
Well, I think they did a cartoon series. I tried to watch it. It was pretty awful, like from what I did. Like, I always heard, but Yogurt actually says that in the movies, like, because they go into, they break the fourth wall and admit they're in a movie, and he says, hopefully we'll meet again in Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if the cartoon series is as bad as you say it, maybe I should just save myself. And
like it was, and this was years and years and years after.
Okay.
But I was looking at the actor, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, Daphne
I think
Zuniga. She didn't really do like a lot of top line stuff that I could tell y'all that like you might know, but like I thought it was kind of remiss not to, since she was a main pivotal character in the movie, I'd be remiss not to mention her, because she was very funny. You think she's got the Princess Leia earbuds, well actually they're just headphones, and she's listening to music. So and she plays the stuck up bratty princess and falls in love with Bill Pullman, and eventually kind of grows up and matures a little bit. One of my favorite lines again is by her: "They shot my hair," and then she goes on a rampage with the gun. And then Dot Matrix says, that was pretty good for Rambo, in response that not bad for a girl.
Right.
That was good for Rambo. So just such a quotable movie. And I think when you're doing a Star Wars spoof, you need those quotes, because Star Wars is so quotable.
That's right.
Like, especially you think of Empire Strikes Back. Oh my God, you can literally what's his the guy who wrote the script, Kasdan. Just a marvelous wordsmith in that movie, as far as just the dialogue, because you're saying all these weird things, and then just be able to pull off just the gravitas of, because you can just say those lines and they just fit, and they just and Han Solo's lines and all the innuendo that in the comedy that's in that. So to make a Star Wars spoof, you've got to have those quotable lines, and things like Blue Harvest, Family Guy, they do it well, and Spaceballs did it very well. Yeah,
because of course you could remember so much about them, and then I remember even rewatching the movie several times and about to say the line, and almost like in the room it's like shh, 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 here it comes, because they'll be saying something that it's like, oh, I love it, I even remember something as minor as, they're going to rescue the princess character and Dot Matrix from jail, and she's in there singing, and it's like, well,
nobody knows but Jesus. And I randomly just sing that at the house, and I have for years and years and years. That's the impression that that's how, when I'm into a movie, when I've seen it a million times, like I can. And that's what's fun about fandom and getting on here and gabbing about it, because at home I just seem like a weirdo, but now I've got a microphone in front of me.
But even just that simple line, she's a base, okay, it's like, but it's like, take a minute and have a joke, get back to the story, wait for the next joke. It's like, oh, the next thing's gonna come up, they're gonna go to ludicrous speed. I love this scene. I loved it as a kid because it was so silly and zany, and I learned a new vocabulary word in the process. Ludicrous, and
what's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken.
And so many, those lines. Even as a kid, you're just saying it. It's like, it's just funny how they delivered it. I love the guy who does the voices, who's also in the Police Academy movies.
The Police. That's what I knew him from when I first saw it. I was like, oh, that's the guy from Police Academy. I'm a little kid. I'm like, because I love that guy. Because as a kid, you hear somebody making all those funny noises, you gravitate towards that guy. So he was my favorite Police Academy guy. And so, because he can make all the funny noises. So, to see him in that, and he's like, it's got the bleeps, bleep, 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 and I can't do it as well as him, so I'm not even going to try to imitate it. But it's like we've been jammed, and only one man would give me the raspberry.
Right.
Don't stop. Sorry, I'm just going to just repeat. We might be in some copyright infringement here with me quoting the entire movie.
I don't know. At some point, then you're just actually, if anything,
we're just reciting it. It's a play in front of the green screen.
Yeah,
here.
If anything, that we're getting new fans, younger fans, to go watch Spaceballs if you haven't seen it.
Yes,
and Spaceballs.
I think that's why I wanted to do it. I mean, and you talk about, you're doing a review of a movie that came out 32 some odd years ago.
Well,
but I think there's room out here to talk about this kind of, if it's something you enjoy and you talk about this stuff. I mean, why does a review? Because a lot of times you're watching a movie, it just came out and then times change, but it's when you can go back years later and you're like, yeah, I still like this movie. And then other movies, you're like, I liked it when it came out, but I don't care to watch it again. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you talk about standing the test of time and what's really good. It takes years and years of measurement to find out what's really going to stick around and kind of be those things that stick with you for your whole life, And I'm not saying that they're selling Spaceballs action figures at Walmart and stuff. I'm not saying it's that kind of big marketing thing like Godzilla or Star Wars or Pokemon or anything like that. But it does have a culture, I think, to people who grew up in that era. And Spaceballs is like, it's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say about that is that, with the timelessness of it, telling a younger generation to check it out. And then I think in a way, it actually made me want to go back and watch Star Wars again, because it was like, it just kind of brought that back out in me. If I put Star Wars on the shelf for a while and didn't watch it for a while and I watched the spoof, and it's like, it may make me not want to watch it. It actually did make me want to watch it again, actually. Just like when I was watching that documentary about the guy who eats too much McDonald's, it made me want to go back to McDonald's and eat McDonald's, even though he's eating it and getting sick on it and gaining all this weight and stuff. It's like, it's not supposed to make me want to eat McDonald's, but it is. It's got the opposite effect.
Smell those fries through the TV screen.
Yes, exactly. And I watched Spaceballs, and of course I want to quote those lines to so many people. I remember even as a teacher, some of the young kids, I was like, quoting some of the lines, and it's like they didn't get it. They never saw the film, and I was like, oh, stop what you're doing and go watch Spaceballs, because it's so quotable. Or watch Airplane, or watch Young Frankenstein, some of these great classics. They don't know what they're missing, and then they find themselves watching it, and some of them don't get it at all, and that's fine. It's just it is a generational thing. Some of them see it and it's like, what have I been missing? Especially with the right after that line you said, when he pulls down the mask and Lone Star, and the camera hits him. And that's the thing that Mel Brooks every once in a while does in his films, is that you weren't expecting that. You were not expecting the fourth wall to be broken because the camera's dollying in,
right?
Actually, trucking in, actually is the term, towards him, and went too far and slammed into him, knocked him over. It's almost like a mistake that would have been in the deleted scenes, but it was meant to be actually in there. Or what else in that? He of course the fourth wall, they grab the movie off the shelf and start watching it.
Oh, you've captured the stunt doubles.
Oh, that one too.
Yeah, I mean I mean, you turn around, Princess Vespa's got a beard and a mustache, and it's a guy dressed as her, and and all these things, and so then of course they get away because they were chasing after the stunt double. So I mean, breaking the fourth wall right there, obviously again, but but that. In some movies that works. The Deadpool movies, I mean, that's part of his character, let alone the story. I mean, that's his character, is to break the fourth wall, to like literally look at the camera, like acting 101, don't look straight into the camera. Look straight into the camera and tell a joke or whatever you're doing. So
wink at the camera, wink at the audience a few times, and be like that. Also, I was going to say, when we were talking about the cast, bringing Dick Van Patten, you remember, you've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights. Mel Brooks, he's in that, of course, and he reads from the New Latin and all that. I think Dick Van Patten, of course, I remember him from commercials, selling products and things like that. That's what I.
He just wanted, to me. I don't know if it's just me, but it's like the Dom DeLuise, like that Dick Van Patten. It's like it's just a name. It's just a name that's out there, and it's like, no, I don't know everything about him, but it's like. And then maybe it's just because I'm 36, and if you're a little younger, maybe not, or maybe if you're a little older, you'll know, maybe be a little bit more familiar with him. But for me, I'm in a place with him, like, where it's like, I know the name, I know that guy's a famous person, but it's like, and then you see like, oh, he was in that movie. Oh, I didn't know he was in that. Like that's where I can place the face to and all this stuff. So it's just kind of interesting. Yeah.
And the people that they do bring in there to do even little cameos at times. I do love it that they leave room for kind of the ridiculousness like that, breaking the fourth wall, when they're what do they do? Oh, what the ludicrous speed, they go past them, and it's like they've gone to plaid.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, because you go to light speed. Is there anything faster than light speed and all that? Apparently there is, and it's called plaid.
Yeah.
So,
Spaceball 1.
Yeah,
they've gone to plaid. It's it's just every line in the movie is just I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say it's delivered well, like from the the culinary of acting schools or whatever, but like it just all works somehow. It just all works.
Yeah, that Mel Brooks, timing is everything in comedy. Actually, if you get your timing wrong, the joke falls flat on its face.
If you wait too long, it's like, we were just talking about that 5 minutes ago. How long did that take you to think that up? But if you think of that stuff on the fly, if you're reactionary, or even, I'm sure some of that stuff could have even been impromptu. They're just like they're improvising on the fly. And I think that probably is just from hearing actors speak, you want to try to do it a little differently every time. If you're doing a second take, why would you do the take the exact same way? Because obviously the director wanted the second take, so you need to, even if it's a slight variance, whether it's something physically, something's doing with your face. But, not to get too far off track, but it's just, anybody who's good at an art form, man, it's going back to our first episode where I was talking about Joseph Campbell and stuff, Joseph Campbell was big. He was married to a dancer, and he was always, in his books, he would talk about, be involved in the arts, like to have a job that you don't like and that's what you go and do every day. That's not how you live. That's not how to live life. You might make a living off of it, but you're not enjoying life. You're not having that passion. He said the best thing you can do is get into the arts, dancing, acting, writing, whatever that is, and you're going to find so much more passion. So for me, like anybody who's able to draw a great picture, act well in a movie and make me believe it and blow me away, like I admire that so much. And I don't use that term lightly, the word admire. I don't say that about many people or many things, but from a purely artistic standpoint, like I admire people who are capable of doing such things. Like it's kind of jealous, actually, in somewhat of a way.
Yeah.
So,
well, and comedies. When you think of comedies, highbrow, lowbrow, whatever. You go back actually to the very first plays and things that were out there. That's what brought in the audience, were the classic comedies. That they would put on. Yes, they would have their romances. Yes, they would have their tragedies. But the comedies brought the audience in. But how many comedies do you hear getting the Oscar for Best Picture award? You don't typically do that. You don't typically get that. But comedies are, a definite part of it. And of course, when I think about life and my job and my, just all the things that might get you down and all of that, and it's like, late at night, we're going to have some snacks. Let's put on a movie. What do you want to watch? And usually it's like, let's put on something funny. I need to escape.
Right.
I need to have that escape and just laugh for a while, and it just works, and it just, it helps me to unwind and all that and forget about it, and sometimes just kick back and laugh. And I think that's what, some of the Mel Brooks films do for you, actually, and do it very well. Like I said, Young Frankenstein is one that I can put on, anytime, actually. And I do enjoy a lot of the other Mel Brooks. It's unfortunate he hasn't made, anything kind of since, I don't know, maybe that Robin Hood Men in Tights.
It's been a while, and now I think he's so up there in years. I'm not sure he's entirely capable of doing anything anymore. But there was a long stretch there where you figure he could have maybe done something, but. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some people are like, you just wonder why they get out of it. Is it like, do they just make a fortune and say, I'm just gonna kind of sit back? See, that's what I would do. Like, if I got like, I don't know that I would be like one of these rich guys that just keep investing and going further and further and doing new things. You look at Elon Musk, it's worth $21 billion. I'm going to open up SpaceX. I'm going to open up all these companies that probably are going to fail, which didn't, but could, in highly likelihood, but he's taken the chance. That's what he enjoys doing, is doing things that, from his perspective, to try to help the earth and save the earth, or from his perspective anyway. I'm not saying I disagree or agree with him. I'll leave that out there because that could be a touchy subject. So we'll just skip on that. but that's his perspective of it. And but I would, just as him as an example, I would be the guy that, like Rick Moranis, I'd be like, I'm just gonna go chill with my family.
Well, it's like if you end on a high note, it's like
it's like George Costanza on Seinfeld. You got to learn how to just walk out of the room and just leave it there.
Right,
like,
right.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, in some ways, you could actually take a franchise and milk it for every penny and every dollar, every cent, and it's just like now you're overdoing it. Now you're just being greedy, and it's like,
where have we seen that before?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
we are talking about a spoof of Star Wars, aren't we? Anyway,
spoof, yeah. Well, and Mel Brooks, it's like I just we hadn't seen anything, and it's like maybe the audience would want something, and maybe he could come back, and what if it fell flat on his face? That's what everyone would remember.
Right.
Is the last thing he did.
Well, and at that point, when you get a considerable fan base, it is impossible to live up to the hype. You might make some people happy. Some rational people might say, "Oh, it's a good film. Maybe I like the prior movies better." But a lot of people out there will say, "Well, I like the other movies better, so this one's horrible." Like, so it's like, just because you like those ones better, let's separate it a little bit. Is it really that bad? Or maybe it is. I mean, and it happens to, eventually it happens to all of them. I mean, at least from a box office success standpoint, you look at they keep coming out with like alien movies and stuff, and they just like, I mean, there's the fan base that goes and sees them, but are you bringing in like that casual movie audience like the other big like blockbuster films do? Everybody who goes and sees the Marvel movies are not huge Marvel fans, but I've seen all the other ones. I've seen most of them. Yeah, I'll go see that. It looks fun. It looks great. Like, and it's inviting, and it's like if I know everything, great. If I don't, like, it's still going to be a fun movie to watch. So I think that's where a lot of these other movies, it's like they've made 15 alien movies now or some version of it. And it's just like, and I think, as a Star Wars fan, I think at one point I thought Star Wars was special or even immune to, and even though the prequels got a large amount of hate, it's kind of funny to see that die down, because now everybody has something new to complain about with Star Wars and stuff. So it's just kind of funny to see things go, and nothing is immune, because especially when you don't have the original creator with that, the soul of it still kind of there. So, and if Mel Brooks didn't think, hey, I don't have the right story. If he wasn't confident in a story that he wanted to tell, then why bring out something just for more money? He could have. I'm sure somebody would have greenlit a movie for him, and he could have went and made one. But maybe from an artistic standpoint, maybe he said, I'm kind of tapped out. I've really made a lot of stuff. I've really made some pretty good stuff that a lot of people enjoy. But I mean, I don't have the energy anymore. I mean, George Lucas retired for several years because he almost had a heart attack on the set of A New Hope. That's why he couldn't direct the other two original trilogy movies.
Overworked him, and it's like, I know my limitations, and I know that, this.
By the time he did the prequels and was able to direct those, he had so much money that he was basically almost financing them, partially himself. So it's like, I don't have to worry about the finance. Back when they were doing Empire, the bank wouldn't extend the loan, and the bank quit over it because he was like, you're gonna not clear a loan extension for the biggest movie of all time, the sequel to the biggest movie of all time,
right?
And he quit over it on principle because they were being stupid. So anyway, you going back to Mel Brooks, you just kind of have to wonder. I'm sure there's probably maybe stuff out there on him you could find on the internet that would say like, when's the last time why did he kind of get out of the game? But everybody has different reasons. You look at Rick Moranis and all of that. So,
but they've had a good career. Their legacy is in good shape and all that. It's a good time to go ahead and maybe throw in the towel and just maybe put your feet up for a while. But I will say this: I think maybe we might even downplay at times the impact a comedy might have on a franchise. But let me just throw this argument at you. Before in the Star Wars franchise, how much comedy that you had in there that was kind of kind of not laugh out loud, but just kind of like, that was kind of funny. It was just like, could somebody get this walking carpet out of my way? And it's not really meant as a joke. It was just a frustration. Some of the comedy that was added into the prequels, let's just forget Jar Jar Binks. Not much comedy really, but I know you don't really care for Last Jedi, but how much was I, thinking we were spoofing Star Wars with that whole Poe Dameron? And
a lot of it felt very, it was like, George would always cut away, like he comes out of Jabba's palace. There's the little alien there, and he burps, or somebody farts in Jar Jar's face. There's those things, but if you go back in movie history, there's always kind of like those gags, but it's like a split. So, there's aliens farting in this movie. Like this is just disgusting for a Star Wars movie. Come on, but it's quick, it's over with, so you can kind of get over it. Some of the other stuff, like Jar Jar, which he significantly cut down on in after Episode 1. But you look at what they did, and it really just felt like the comedy in The Last Jedi. They were trying to do a Marvel take on it, and they were like, this is kind of like it's Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe with the tempered down just a little bit from that kind of comedy, but still very close. And I just felt like it didn't fit the world that had been built around us for 7 movies and comic books and novels and all of this stuff. It just took me so far out of the world. Maybe we should just do a Last Jedi review and for another show, or maybe this will be part of it.
The point is that that you would say that there is an influence in there, whether you like it or not. Whether good, bad, or
influences can come from everywhere, and we don't. And Rian Johnson wrote and directed that film, so we don't. You don't ever know where those influences came from, but we can speculate. And I used to do that all the time. Like, I wonder if he was thinking about that. And it's interesting to think, what was he thinking when he did that? Like, that's a compelling thing to think about. I love thinking about things like that. But but with him, I'm like, what was he thinking about? It's more of that tone of voice. Like, what point, are we going to get some kind of a cohesive story here? So, but anyway, I just felt like with Spaceballs, yes, it is supposed to be funny. You go in, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Like those movies, I feel like the comedy isn't misrepresented. I feel like when you get into but you're trying to produce a serious tone. It's the middle chapter. It's a depressing movie. And to me, it just didn't fit thematically for me and everybody, and there's going to be people out there who completely disagree with me. And I know there are going to be people out there that completely agree with me. And that's cool too. But yeah, I mean, with Spaceballs, I think with movies like that, it just, you know what you're going into. So if you don't like comedy, then don't put it in. But don't present something to me. Well, this is it's a science fiction. It's fictional, serious. I'm not saying no comedy relief, but give me that Han Solo comedy. Sorry, sweetheart, we don't have time for anything else. It's like, it's cheesy, but it's suave kind of at the same time. Of course, you have Harrison Ford saying it, so he can kind of get away with saying anything because he's Harrison Ford. So sometimes you just have to, everything. It's like catching lightning in a bottle. And sometimes you just got to be really lucky. And I think, you look back at those original trilogy. I mean, George Lucas was just lucky at the talent because he knew talented people, but he's lucky in the way that he did. The editors because A New Hope was a mess, in that he had to fire the editor, and you get those guys come in and they won the Academy Award before they thought about winning Academy Awards. So the job that you do on all that stuff. So you have to kind of get lucky. You got to have that Harrison Ford in the room with you that's just going to catch lightning in a bottle. Okay, that shouldn't have worked. The I love you line, I know, that shouldn't work, but it did. And that was impromptu. It was on the fly. He's like, just do it, Harrison, do it. So I know we're getting into Star Wars here, but that's fine. So I guess that's a good segment to start kind of closing the show out. But I mean, we were talking a Star Wars spoof and Spaceballs. So let's just, you said Spaceballs is not on the top of your Mel Brooks list, but it's right up there for me. It's number 1. What would you give it out of, well, just so we have some room for different, let's just do out of 10 stars. Let's do 10 stars. That way, if we ever do it in the future. So what would you give Spaceballs out of 10, 30 some odd years later?
Sure. I definitely give it a solid 7.5, almost 8, because like I said, when it comes to comedy, it's on my shelf. I do watch it often. I do find myself, enjoying it. But when it comes to my favorite Mel Brooks and even comedy, I do find myself actually more in my time of life, liking episodic, throwing in a Simpsons, for instance. Something more episodic. I am definitely comedy.
The same way at this point in my life. Like, I am definitely more into smaller bite-sized pieces, but if you want to binge it, there's a lot of episodes, so there is a lot of arc and content there, even more so than a movie. That's why I love, like Game of Thrones and things like that. It's like an hour, half an hour at a time. But if I want to watch 10 hours in a row of it, like I certainly can.
You could,
and there's
yeah.
all that, and it's all one kind of cohesive season. Instead of a 2-hour movie, you get kind of a 10-hour movie. So
Yeah.
if you want to watch it that way, so that I do love the new way of television. I think it's definitely the way they should keep producing everything. And honestly, I hate to say this, but I'd like to see less movies and take these stories that were going to be movies, and especially stuff where you're taking from books and you're adapting books. Wait, could you imagine Harry Potter is a Netflix television series each year, an hour long, 10? I mean, it would be. I mean, you'd get all the stuff that got left out of the books, but now we have a way of doing all that with Netflix and Amazon and all of
Hulu,
these, all
original
this stuff.
series.
Yes, and it feels like we have a way of doing that. So I'd like maybe we'll talk a little bit about that on the next episode, just as a segue. For me, Spaceballs is probably my. It's between that and Ghostbusters as far as my number one comedy of all time. I just loved, I loved John Candy in the movie, Bill Pullman, just everybody. And then I just got to read a couple more of the lines here. When did we get to Disneyland when he sees the Jawa knockoffs there? I said the shot my hair. Of course, maybe the best line in the movie when they've gone down in the yogurt's lair, and he talks about the merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made. Probably the most truth that you're ever going to find in any Hollywood movie, because they're just telling you really how it is. Because now we know that, it's about selling toys and action figures and stuff. And he's going through, we got Spaceballs and Spaceballs, the flamethrower. The kids love that one.
Right. But he was probably a little ahead of the curve on that one, because it's funny how many internet memes and GIFs that are out there that are just telling the truth, and then the truth is actually, funnier than any kind of joke you might make, is because they're actually just telling the truth actually about
that's the sign of a great comedian is, you watch a lot of stand-up and all they're doing is just taking the truth and just cutting it in the jokes, but it's really kind of all from a perspective is the truth. So, and
I was always wanting the Spaceballs, lunchbox and cereal and all that as a kid, and all that, waiting for it to come out, and it never did, of course. But I was
and obviously that was more of a dig just right at George Lucas.
Oh, I know.
And not even say that that Mel Brooks was saying, tisk tisk George, you're bad for doing it. He was just like, but it's the way it is, and I'm just gonna poke some fun at you, and all that. And it's like George knows how he made his billions. There's only so much money to be made at the box office and Blu-ray sales. It's like they've sold a lot more toys than they have DVDs.
Yes. Well, you watch that Netflix series of the toys that made us on the Star Wars, and just the film's box office success up against the toy success is not even close to it. It's all the merchandising, which he had it just right. So poking fun in a loving way towards George and all and Lucasfilms and all that. But they had, and think if it were made today, I just think some of the jokes might have fell flat, because everything kind of gets so much more serious in comedy at times, and when you can really back off and just be goofy, just be silly, take nothing seriously at times in this film. But it is funny that they always they do try to have a cohesive storyline. They do try to have some continuity with it and all that. And so you are engaged in these characters who have a goal and have a mission and get into danger and get into places and all that. But it is funny that you have the villain in this that you love to hate, and you kind of do love Rick Moranis' character and Colonel Sanders and all of them.
And speaking of actors, that completely kind of, yes, he's in a comedic role, but playing the villain, I don't think anybody besides in this movie, you're not thinking of Rick Moranis as a villain in any sort. I mean, he's so small in stature. I mean, even for an actor, there's a lot of these actors that are kind of, I'm a big guy, guys. So I'm not getting on people that are smaller in build, but I'm about 6'3". So you see sometimes when you even see a Robert Downey Jr. stand next to an athlete or something, and he just looks diminutive. He's just so much smaller. Not just in height, but just across the shoulders. You got the Tom Cruise, who's notoriously made fun of for height, but you look at Rick Moranis, and you can just tell he doesn't have to stand next to anybody. He's a little guy, and so it's just funny that he's trying to play the big bad intimidator, and just basically kind of nobody really respects him. They fear revere him, but they don't really respect him. He just kind of gets made fun of, but he still has the Schwartz, so nobody really wants to cross him. So he's shooting people in the private area and doing things like that. But for me, Spaceballs, it being ranked up there on my list, it's probably just one of my favorite movies, period, in not breaking it down into a category. So I would give it, 8.5 or 9 out of a 10 for me, just just as a personal thing. So I always have said, who cares about a rating or what somebody rates it? It's all the other stuff we're saying. And hopefully if you don't care about stars and ratings, at least maybe some of the other stuff at least reminded you of Spaceballs when you watched it. Maybe you want to go back and watch it now, or maybe you're a little younger and want to go watch it for the first time, and then leave a comment below and tell us what you thought of the movie and tell us your favorite quotes from the movie.
Yeah. And I think, if I had to be critical on any point in the story at all, I really could be critical. It's hard to be critical on a comedy, but there are times
it's almost like if you're being critical, like if you're a movie critic and you're wanting to bash this movie, at that point you're taking movies too seriously.
Yes, you are.
If you're bashing, well, this is just it might not be your taste, but it's like and I guess it's your job, and if that's what your opinion is, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's all art in a way, and it's like sometimes we just take things a little too seriously, and I've been at fault too as well. So I'm not to blame at anyone else.
But I would say, if anything, that they had the right amount of jokes for the right amount of length of time, because you could be a comedy that just constantly is overwhelming the audience with the jokes.
You get laughed out.
Yes, and it's just like this one had the right amount of it, and the timing worked so that they didn't overwhelm you with it. You're still engaged in the story, waiting on that next joke to come, because again, if you just keep throwing them at people, constantly, they're going to get burned out very quickly and all that. So I think, there's some times in the story where it slows down just a bit and has even a romantic, storyline that's going on. But then they, throw a few wrenches in there, some gags and all that, and then they get away from that.
The virgin alarm and things like that. She wakes up when they're going to kiss, and so there's just so much. There's actually so many jokes in the movie, and you just almost forget about it without watching it. But I think the funniest part to me is just remembering all these lines, and then it's almost funnier to repeat them for me than it is to actually go back and rewatch it. And it's like, I probably am not going to laugh out loud at these moments anymore because I've seen it so many times. But when you're interacting with somebody else and remembering these times, and you kind of get a chuckle out of it, maybe when the film doesn't strike that chord as much as it used to with you anymore. So
but I think the timeless comedies, you can't go wrong with it. It's not one that's I can see in the discount bargain bin or anything. I see it as
and it is timeless, I think, in the way that it's in the way that Star Wars is timeless, because it's not really somewhere where we're gonna get that this movie is gonna be like outdated, like the theme of it anyway. It can't be outdated, because it's like, if it is, it's not going to be in our lifetime, because realistically of the exploring space and things like that, it's such a daunting concept to most humans, So I think that it's still a look to the future, what's to come, what's out there. I think that mystery, even in 2018, I still think we have a lot of that, and I think that movies that can placate to that and kind of be in those universes, I think they're kind of positioned better to be timeless, just because the theme and the story of the movie, all you need are those classic themes of storytelling, and the setting is going to take care of itself, because that's not going to be outdated anytime soon in our real world. So
I'm glad we did this episode, because when we got to talking, we definitely both have a background with this film, and it's had an impact, whether small, whatever kind of impact in our lives and all that, but it's part of our childhood, part of our upbringing. We have memories from it and all that, and I think that's what's great about the film, and actually makes the timeless kind of classics. How many of those I can't even remember the spoof films that were being made in the 90s and early 2000s,
the scary movie stuff. I remember walking out on the Date movie spoof movie or whatever it was. Like it was a 90-minute movie, felt like it was 3 hours. It was a slog, wasn't funny. I think we walked out 30 minutes, and it was only a 90-minute movie. We only had to make it through 90 minutes, and it's like, no, this is awful. Walked out. I think it might be the only movie I've ever walked out on. So that's the thing when I'm talking about Spaceballs and how much I like it. I'm not a fan of spoofs, especially in movie form.
Yeah.
You've got the robot chickens and things like that. Television, you know, in smaller sample shows spoofing something, I think it does work a lot better. We've seen where the quality can be better because you don't need as much content to just spoof at one time. If you're trying to fill 90 minutes or an hour and 45 minutes, it's a little harder to do. So yeah, those movies never resonated with me. I never enjoyed them. Even though I liked the Scream movies, I didn't like the Scary movies, which that was the main basis of the spoof. And then they kind of went off the rails and went everywhere, made fun of everything, I think.
Yeah.
But, you know, made fun of all the different Scary movies, which I'm also not a fan of a lot of different Scary movies and horror movies. I'm just not my genre, not my field of expertise. So those movies definitely were completely out of touch for me. Like I don't generally enjoy spoofs, and but so for me to say Spaceballs, I don't like spoofs, but I love Spaceballs.
Good.
So just leave it at that.
I'll leave it at that too. I think we're tapped out on Spaceballs. We're good to go. Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Well, guys, check the links and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We'll just have all that in the description. We won't keep you any longer. Guys, have a good day.